Back to our first panel, how can cities be shaped in a post-pandemic world? Who owns the data and who owns the cities? These are the questions we are going to discuss, and you have already got to know our first panelist, Francesca Bria, and I'd like to introduce to you the other panelists. We also have with us Marina Weisband. She's a psychologist, a member of the German Green Party, and an expert on digital participation. Hello, Marina. And also with us is Toomas Türk. He is the head of Future City and Digital Services of Tallinn, and he created the Smart City Agenda for Tallinn. Welcome.
Hello.
So, but my first question goes to Francesca. Francesca, you said that you are claiming digital sovereignty to recover democratic control of the data. But in everyday life, many people don't feel really sovereign when it comes to digitalization. They feel more externally driven. So how can we change this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is one of the main reasons why actually I think that cities have a very important role to play, because the question of data sovereignty can become abstract for people. Although, of course, we know that when we're talking about digital sovereignty today, we are in fact also talking about political sovereignty and economic sovereignty. So I think it should be at the very center of our political agenda, but it can seem far and distant from people's life. In fact, in my work in Barcelona, I really tried to bring those questions of data sovereignty and who is controlling our data and for what we are digitalizing closer to what people care about. So instead of talking about only about privacy, about data protection, about technology itself, which of course are very important topics, I try to link it to things that matter to citizens. So how, for example, we all know that platforms for housing like Airbnb had a very strong impact in many cities around Europe because their business model, which in fact is based on very opaque algorithms and very opaque way of like gathering data and so on, it has been affected affordable housing. So, we had to show that when cities are negotiating with platforms, for example, they have to demand transparency of algorithms and access to data, because without that, we are not able anymore to regulate, for example, the housing market and to make sure that we have affordable housing for citizens. Same things for transportation, same things for climate change and CO2 emissions, So showing that if we have a more democratic control of data, if we use data as a common good, we collectively can address, the problems that really people care. And then finally, just engaging in participatory democracy, also there, you are not going to ask people about data in itself, right? Because people find it very abstract. But you're going to show that if you want to engage citizens, really, you have to do it on things that matter to them. For example, how we transform mobility, how we are changing public spaces, how we are transforming healthcare, how we are changing education. What about your rights as a worker in the platform economy? So just to end, I think these are the questions that we have to discuss. They are not about technology. They're about the social and economic models that we are building for our future.
Thanks. So we are going to discuss more about participation in a couple of minutes. But first, Toomas, the next question is to you. So Tallinn was named Intelligent Community of the Year 2020. What makes Tallinn successful, and who owns the data of the Tallinn citizens?
Thank you for the question. Of course, we have a different position as we have this 20 years of history already to provide these digital services. And this is very much based on trust. So, and the trust was built on a national level. So we have this public key infrastructure. Everyone has access to secured information. And of course, we are, as a city, building our services on top of that. So most of these digital services where you don't have to go to the service desk anymore, but you can use them online. That was one of the key elements what we faced 2 years ago when all this pandemic started. So we were just continuing the normal life on that time. And this was also recognized by this Intelligent Community Forum, who saw that actually the level of digital services was really high. But the second important topic here is also that all the change and understanding of this openness and security and all the other important issues in a digital world starts with education. And this is a second topic that was recognized in this Intelligent Community Forum application, that we also face that there is a lot of primary school programs, there is a lot of university programs. So the awareness amongst the citizens in the city was quite high in that level as well. And this also brings us opportunities to see that the services provided by businesses in a city, for example, they are also taken care on the same level as they are, for example, services provided by the government. So in our case, everything was related really about history of having this digital world already in place, and also that we see in the future that's a demand to understand what is discussions about the cybersecurity, data ownership in the future is an important topic to continue that, and to find the next levels, of course, among the citizens to bring the benefit for the citizens, because there is nothing more important than, you know, the digital world should be beneficial for them.
Yeah, we have one expert on digital participation here as well, Marina Weisband. So what do you think? How can we empower people regarding digital smart cities?
Yeah, look, I'm from a developing country, Germany, so we are not as far as you in almost all cities. It's always on a city level, and we make first baby steps in digitalizing governance. But I think the main focus should not be on what services are already digitalized. The main focus should be on how we perceive ourselves as citizens. And I think that is, with every model that works well, as both speakers described, it's always that citizens need to see themselves as creators of their surroundings, and not as consumers. Because when you make a decision like a consumer, you tend to give away control and you tend to give away your data. And that is what we see with most social networks. When you think like a creator, it's natural that your data should belong to you. That's just logical. So the question is, how do we transform people from consumers to creators? Because, to be honest, we're all educated as consumers by our smartphones, by social media, but before that, by advertising. And at least in Germany, the situation is so that many people even vote as if they were choosing a product on the market, and they're like, oh, this party is not so good, and this party is, it's not as good as it was 10 years ago, so I have nothing to vote. Which, you know, when you're a creator, you go in and you start, you join a party and transform it from within, or you make a movement and transform it from without. And this is the kind of work that I've been doing for 7 years in schools. And what I do is basically, and in communities, what I do is basically I give young people ages 10 to 18 the right to change their immediate surroundings, because I find it very important what Francesca says. It has to be things that they see every day. It has to be their everyday life, not nationwide politics. So I give them the power with a contract to shape their surroundings in a certain frame. and they can vote on it, they can discuss it, they can advertise for it, and they need to implement it themselves. So they will call a firm, they will ask for invoices, they will go through the whole democratic process, and in the end, something will have changed, and that gives them self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is the main psychological process behind this new understanding of a citizen who owns their data, who is well-informed, who's an active citizen. It's really this, you learn over and over and over again that you can change the world around you.
Thank you so much. And I'd also like to invite you to really discuss with each other. So first, I'd like to pick the first question from our audience. And someone is saying, I do not see any solution how elderly will participate except by support of their young relatives. How can we include elderly people more in this progress?
Go, Marina, go.
Oh, thank you. I have an idea for that, and that is basically we need more open spaces in cities where we bring together elderly people and younger people, digital savvy people with digital non-savvy people. So that's the first part. We need intergenerational exchange, and that is not only good for digital skills, that is also very important against loneliness and for a society, because what we do when we connect different generations is we set them on eye level, because maybe someone younger might be more tech savvy, but maybe someone older might be better at, you know, seeing power dynamics play out. And that's the other part of media literacy that young people don't have at all. So they start to learn from each other, and that levels them and that connects them. But we need spaces to do that, and we need people trained in connecting people to do that. And I think that's mostly, you know, you need the people employed to do that. And the second thing is my grandma bought a computer, and she's from Ukraine, and she bought a computer when she was 70, and she went on Twitter just because I wasn't calling her often enough, and she wanted to know what's up with me. And she now knows all my friends and all my relatives, and she doesn't even speak a word of German. She used Google Translator. So when you have a goal, you automatically learn, and that goes for older people as well. The problem is if we have no digital participation, if we have nothing to achieve digitally, there is no motivation to learn it.
And I may also say something, actually, in our participatory democracy work that I talked about, we looked at the data because we also wanted to know if we have been inclusive, who is participating, because actually, as also Marina is saying, you have to employ people to do this work. So we had created a department that was named, you know, Citizens Action. And this department had people with different expertise, some people more working on social cohesion, some people working on including a variety of people, because it's not only age, it is also about ethnic background, it is about gender diversity, it's about different socioeconomic backgrounds. You don't want to all involve people that live in the city centers, but you also want to, you know, be inclusive with the different neighborhoods and so on. And so we looked at the data, and we were very surprised because many people that participated were around 65, 60 years old, and there were many. And I think the key, first of all, of course, you have to make the technology accessible. And also, as Toomas said before, investing in education, have spaces, physical spaces in the cities where citizens can go and can learn about issues, can learn about how to, you know, use these kind of tools. But the tools are pretty simple. At the end, is really about making sure that you are engaging people on what matter to them. So I can tell you that older people, if you are deciding, you know, if you are creating a new park, or if you are changing the mobility pattern, or if you are creating a new social center next to their home, or you are doing some urban reconstruction project, they are going to participate because they care about what you're changing, and they are part of the community and they want to feel involved. So I think we have to also do it a little bit different. But definitely the question of inclusion and the question of participation that is broader, it is very important. But we should not, look at this digital thing as it is just, young people clicking on apps. I mean, this is not the type of democracy we have in mind.
I personally strongly agree that these communities are very important, and even we can say in a city that neighborhoods are important, families are important. So this is like Francesca, you described your, or Marina, you described your story here. So the elderly people inclusiveness is something that is working in a communities very well. We have also seen that one, and actually it's visible now that this age limit we are talking like 10 years back. Then were like 50 plus people who were not included in this digital world, but now we see it's like 65 plus. So the generation is changing, and there is a new, let's say, generation who is like 80-90% digital already. But there is also one thing I would like to point out, that all these digital services should not be meant for the young people and done as a digital way. For example, there is a very good example from Tallinn, Estonia, is the e-prescription. So you can just call to your doctor to get new medicine, and then the doctor will add this into this IT digital way. But when you go to the drugstore, you just show your ID card. And this is something that you can, is already in a back end or in this system way already is done. So, and the person will get this drug from the store. So usually the services should not be like you have to interact with a computer. You can use still the phone, you can go to the desk service, etc. But all this process behind this providing this service is digitalized. And this is the way we see the efficiencies are, and we see also that there is a control of the process, and also the citizens, of course, can do that online by themselves as well. But there is also this physical way of interaction included into this digital world.
We got another question. Some people are asking what are the plans in Germany regarding what Marina said. I think we discussed this in a later panel. But one other question is, how important is it for cities to provide publicly owned space for citizens to meet each other? In brackets, without having to consume drinks and food.
Immensely important. I mean, inner cities are dying out, and I've read that we can't open the roads for pedestrians and bikes because inner cities would die out without cars, and we cannot close the Karstadt because inner cities would die out. But I have hardly found any plans to really bring life into the cities beyond consuming, to make. I call it a Volkshochkneipe, which is basically like a community college combined with a bar and a cafe and a library and maker spaces and studios for YouTube videos and things where people can take courses. So open spaces for education and just meeting people over a cheap drink or maybe no drink at all. You don't have to consume to meet. And I think many spaces are lacking that. And cities grow in culture when you create spaces where citizens can meet in person, which is very ironic from me as a digital person. But I think that goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I found that also very interesting from the keynote. Francesca, you said we should not only focusing on becoming digital, but also green and carbon neutral. So how does these two things go together?
No, first of all, also in the previous question, they go very much, it's about really creating new public spaces. And so the example I made during my talk of the Barcelona super block, I think it's a great example of that, because when you are reshaping your city to become carbon neutral, you will understand that, for instance, you have to tackle the question of density and traffic density, and you have to remove some cars from city centers, and you have to move towards this 15-minute cities model. model where citizens have access to essential services more in proximity. And to do that, it is absolutely critical to create more public spaces, so to give back this space to the residents and then work with them. I mean, the Superblock project lasted, first of all, it's an urbanistic vision that, it's there for 30 years from the kind of urban planners that conceived Barcelona. It has been implemented throughout the time. So we understand also how you need a vision and the project for the city. And then in the last, let's say, 5 to 6 years, it has been really become a reality. And we worked like an entire year participating with residents, with urban planners, with architects, with designers, with students, with local businesses, interacting on how to reshape these newly created public spaces. So do we need a cultural center? Do we need just a green area? Do we need different type of local businesses that are struggling also in this pandemic? Because as we saw, the big platforms, it was a positive shock for them. And, now everybody is buying things on the big platforms. What happened to the local businesses, to the small businesses that are the backbone of our economies is a very important thing to address. So you have all these different questions, and these questions come up when you do this kind of visionary intervention to transform the city, to make it greener and to make it more digital. And I think the digital should be at the service of people and the ecological transition, at the service of this transformation. It should not guide it. So, because we have to understand that the digital is just, we are creating enabling new type of institutions, enabling new type of infrastructures, but they are nothing in itself. If you go to the cities and say, well, you're going to have plenty of blockchains in the cities, you're going to have 5G everywhere, you're going to have data available, they will say, but to do what? As also we were saying before, what are the benefits? What are we transforming? So I think the questions should be those. And I really think that this coupling these two big transformation, how we digitalize in a democratic and sustainable way, and tackling climate change and transforming our cities toward net zero, which is really the main goal, should go hand in hand. And this is a task we have to do it, because I can tell you, and you can discuss it in our panel, and maybe Toomas can also say it if in Tallinn is different, but I've been working with many cities now, and I know that you have the climate action and sustainability department that is doing a lot of planning, and they have a lot of targets and so on, and the digital department and people working with data is still separated. I mean, it still has to come more together and to put these digital infrastructures and data at the service of people and this big transformation. So I think there is a lot to do there.
I can just add that in our case, for example, they are working together because we have one strong goal. We have the city agenda for the 2035 to become this green global city, and we also become the European green capital in 2023. So there is no way that we can do it in a separate silos. But there is also one important topic.
We are all going to move to Tallinn.
You're very welcome. But there is also an issue how to keep this green in the cities, because we, for example, have the Natura 2000 area within the city. How to keep all this flora and fauna in a balance. And this is something that where, the community and all this co-creation of different new services, for example, areas where you can do some sports, where you can just have a leisure time. So you need to integrate with the physical space of the cities. But from this digital side, of course, you need to know that the technology can be an answer every time. But what was the question? So why do you need these digital services? And this is the most important thing to start with, was a digital plan, because you have things like pandemic can happen one day. Are you prepared for that? So what can you do as a city? How you can improve the citizen life quality? What you can do with education? What you can do with nature protection, and etc. etc. So and of course you need to have a lot of data for that. that because in cities you see that everyone is discussing about, for example, mobility. So there is a lot of CO2 coming from mobility areas. Of course, this is a great and important topic. But the other thing is, for example, industries about, for example, having this housing in the Nordic countries like in Tallinn. We also see that a lot of the emissions coming from the heating and on using the electricity, for example, for which purpose. So there are complex issues the cities are facing. So, but if you have, for example, this long-term goal to become something in 2030, there are like Nordic countries, they are having like a very early deadlines for this becoming the CO2. But what you can also do is how you can actually promote and produce more O2, because this is a balance of the CO2. So we normally forget that we just fight with the CO2, but it's also increase the green space and also they provide this better life for the citizens.
Well, the pandemic has accelerated the digitalization, and the question is what do you think? Are there more positive or also negative outcomes? Because Francesca, you said in 2020, one of COVID-19 long-term impacts will be the reshaping of digital surveillance. So how would you view this today?
Yeah, I think there are big questions. For me, I'm trained as an economist, and I think that one of the biggest questions that we're going to face, which has to do, of course, with digital sovereignty, is that, as I said also before, during the pandemic, everything has accelerated our digital life. And I think now it has become much more of a conversation of everybody. It's not anymore only the geeks or the technology experts or the digital experts that are discussing, how to improve digital services, but it's becoming part of people's daily life. But in particular, because of the digitization of education, so many kids have been doing remote education during this pandemic, what we call smart working, which is actually distant working or a new hybrid that we don't really understand what it is at the moment. But anyways, I think we had a much more kind of like our Zoom calls for like 2 years, and we had a much more digital, let's say, dimension in our lives. I think this has imposed, for example, a very important discussion and debate at the European Parliament level, which was like, okay, now, connectivity and the basic infrastructure that we use to connect to the internet, it has become a very critical infrastructure of our time, upon which essential services of society depend. So we should make it a basic right of all citizens. And this was a very important debate, because maybe the right to the connectivity or the right to the internet should become a basic human right. And this can be fine. But at the same time, we realized, in particular in Europe, I guess this is the same in Tallinn, I must say, that we are strongly dependent on very few, providers of this kind of technological infrastructure. So, we have many studies showing how much Europe is depending when it comes to hardware and microchips, data, cloud, artificial intelligence services, software, like all the parts of this digital infrastructures, of this digital stack, are now in the control, in the hands of, I would say, the digital ecosystem, of course, is more complex. But if we look at the economic data, the big tech companies from the US and from China, they have a market evaluation of around, $8 trillion US. And during the pandemic, their market value has increased of more than 1.3 trillions. This is huge. This means that, can we really, if we have a digital society where 5 to 7 companies own the digital society, can it work for all of us? And how do we tackle this dependence? Because at the end, we have to choose if we want to have digital sovereignty or if we will end up in a digital colonialism. And as Europe, we are really risking that second option if we do not put forward our own strategy and our own capacity to deploy. However, I think we should invest much more in, for example, having the ambitions of creating these green technologies for the future, of creating the next generation digital technologies that will be privacy enhancing and rights preserving and more decentralized. So Europe should bet on open source technology, on decentralization, on privacy enhancing technology, and on green tech, and have the ambitions to create these technologies here in Europe. And I think cities will have to play a big role. And then put forward our more democratic model, because I think we don't want to end up in a digital authoritarianism. And we have seen it, I think, during the pandemic, that we sometimes, we were showing this kind of model of really massive surveillance where all the citizen data were aggregated and we were tracked and monitored all day as, okay, this is the way to tackle the public healthcare crisis. I think we managed to do it differently. And even there, Europe showed that, yes, we can deploy, and now we have the Green Pass and contact tracing application that are actually preserving our privacy. And we can do that in interoperable way, so that, it's for all citizens of Europe. So it's not only nation-based, because I think this is another thing we should discuss, how we make it pan-European. How, as citizens, we can use digital identity, we can own our data. We're going to have to use a digital euro soon that protect our privacy, and to do that in a pan-European way, and privacy preserving and rights preserving. So I think these are the big questions we should tackle in the future. And of course, cities have a role to play, but it's also about national governments and what Europe is going to do as a whole.
But there is also another option that, for example, we are discussing that European level and also its national level and so on. And then comes startups, and they just disrupt the situation, and they make a new level of understanding all these services and to provide them. So it's one of the ways also to learn from the startups. We have produced so many unicorns already, and we see that when Skype started like 17 years ago from Tallinn already. So it has been something that changed, the travel industry and also other understandings of doing the business. But one of the hot topics besides is how we are running this digital infrastructure is also, of course, the mental health of people. And this is where, the tools from the digital world can also help, because we have the limited resources from the healthcare system at the moment. In the future, we have them less even. And it's just a question of how we can actually use or develop new solutions that can help people with this health mental situation. So that's very important for the next decade, I guess.
I would like to add two things. First of all, if we want to invest in open software, we need, as public actors, as the state or as cities, pay engineers better, because at least in German, the state is paying non-competitive wages. So the open software that is developed is just not really good most of the time. And the second thing is that even if we have open software, say open platforms, privacy preserving platforms, they will have a hell of a hard time competing against the big platforms due to the network effects. So the second thing that Europe needs to do is to establish interoperability. They need to force the big platforms to be interoperable. That means they need to establish open protocols that I can read my friends' Twitter posts without being on Twitter myself, because only then we can break the quasi-monopolies of the big platforms, because we cannot establish a new egalitarian society using only capitalist infrastructure that their business model is selling attention, and that is just not a good base to establish a democracy.
Yeah, you want to add something, Toomas?
No. I mean, it's go. No, I wanted just to. I think the core of what Marina just said is that even if we build the best type of technologies, even if we pay more the engineers and we go to this kind of open model, at the end we're going to have to change the business model, because if the business model exactly it is based on selling and manipulating and monetizing people's information and data, the externalities of the network effect is going to be fake news, conspiracy theory, mental health problems, leakages, all the kind of things that are damaging the Habermasian public sphere, that are damaging our democratic life. And that's the point, that I think not everything should happen on these commercial platforms that have this kind of business model, but we should be reclaiming some kind of public digital sphere where we can build technologies for solidarities, for the public good, and do that, in a ways that enable people to, to collaborate based on preserving their rights and their health and not giving it away. So I think it's a very important point.
Maybe one question that adds pretty well is how can data protection is performed when startups merges next moment with big companies or security services?
That's a question about which data is there for the usage of the startup. So if they are just using the regular customer relationship management programs and then your data is there, you need to have this opt-in, opt-out option when you sign up with a service. This is what the citizens can decide by themselves. But of course, interoperability is one of the important topics here, because if you just as a startup can also use open data-based information available from the public sector and integrate that with, for example, with telecom, banking and other industries, though there is a potential that these services are just like a front end, or just providing these services, so the data is kept for example, in the public sector register still. And this is what gives or provides a more secure position for the consumer.
One person wants to know how to address the rebound effect of digital infrastructure using more energy than before because it becomes more efficient on our way to climate neutrality. Who would like to answer this?
I mean, I think Francesca has kind of already answered it. The question is not, do you digitalize? The question is, what do you digitalize for? And if you digitalize to go greener, if you digitalize to minimize your emissions, then, well, there is no rebound effect. And the second thing, of course, is we need to make energy realistically expensive. So we need to pay for the down costs. And if you do that, systems will become automatically more economic.
No one wants to add something? Yeah?
It's not that easy to actually set limits for the electricity consumption or energy usage, because we also like to see different new widgets and gadgets to be used in the world. But of course, we have to think as citizens that if we have this digital trash already in different places, so we just maybe can cancel or not to use the ones, because I don't think that it's only about the discussion how to change the mobility in the cities and have more bicyclers, etc. But it's more about how to get rid of this old digital information which is not used anymore. And this is what the cloud business is booming. So, but there is still, a lot of information or data which we don't use, and let's get rid of that first. And that's what, for example, in Tallinn case, there was 3 years ago when tech companies together with public sector announced this tech pledge. So there is a kind of initiated program to get rid of this old information that we don't need anymore.
I'd like to go back to the question, how can we make people participate in digital process? And we have already heard some suggestions from Tallinn and Barcelona, but I know there are also things going on in Münster. Marina, Münster wanted the citizens to give their opinion on the budget planning. You've been involved, so what did you learn from it?
Yeah, that was over 10 years ago, and Münster decided we'll make an online platform and we'll have citizens. We have a budget for the citizens, and the citizens can put their ideas online, how they want to spend the budget, and vote on that. That is a brilliant idea. So I was very confused when I was handing out flyers and people would pass me by and say, no, thanks. And I was wondering why no thanks. And then I learned that this is basically, people are used not to be heard. And then I looked at the system and it was just suggestions. So what happened was the citizens voted on a couple of ideas, but then the municipality said, oh yeah, thank you for your ideas, but that is not really feasible and that isn't either, so we're not going to do that. So what happened was the citizens invested energy and resources, and it all went to nothing. And what we learned is that we cannot really change our surroundings even if we invest. So next time the citizens are asked, they will probably not invest said resources. And what I learned there is when you do participation, you need to make it binding. So now I learned from that. Now I work in schools and I have an online platform that allows very different students to participate because some of them don't speak German or learn German as a second language, and they can use online translators. It's a whole new thing. It's a whole new level of accessibility for them. But they like to use the system after 1 or 2 years. They start to use the system really naturally and actively because they first need to learn that when they invest energy, they do get returns and they really do change their surroundings. And there's no teacher saying, oh, no, we can't do that. And what I need to do for that is make a contract with the school board. The school board agrees to adapt all the ideas within this certain frame. I think that's a major point because you can make participation really easy, but that's not enough. You also need to make it powerful.
What is your opinion on that, Francesca, Toomas? So how can you give people really the feeling that they are heard?
Well, I think my opinion is that we need political change. I mean, it's like this is actually very simple answer for me because many times we're there thinking that it's citizens that don't like to participate, or is their fault that they don't want to do it, or that they don't understand it, and here and that. But, I think it's harder to change what's happened on the other side. So who actually is elected into power? Because, if, for example, we elect people that really care about devolving power to the citizens and really care about engaging citizens in decision-making, I can tell you that it will happen. So we need commitment from the political side to change this relationship, to create more trust and to create more power, to really enable this participatory democracy to flourish. I think for me, this is a very big political priority because, we should not see participatory democracy done, of course, hybridly, digital and offline, both ways. We should not see it as a threat to representative democracy. We should see it as the way we are strengthening our democratic institutions. Because if we don't do that, the reaction that we can have is extreme populism, like right-wing populism, as we saw in the past. Because people feel disenfranchised, they feel they have no agency and no power, and they lose control. And then we see this kind of, nationalism and right-wing populism to gain momentum. And this is what we cannot afford as society. And I think that the reaction to that is not authoritarianism, is not less democracy, but is more democracy. So we should take this question very seriously, and we should introduce all these that has been now experiments, really, but that happened everywhere and in different places, in cities, in local parliaments, in national parliaments, in European parliaments, all across. And we should try to build a solid framework to improve our participatory democracy and make sure that people are more involved because we need them to own these solutions, to own the debate also, And you know, we need people to be more aware, to participate, because otherwise, how are you going to make sure that we decarbonize our economies? I mean, this is going to be massive changes for people's behavior. So we need to, and also the economic discussions and everything. So I think we need to be able to open up those spaces for participation. And it's not only that the citizens don't do it, is what politicians commit to. I think this is also very important.
One of the solutions is also about communication and keeping the doors open. So as we as a local government, so we can keep our doors open so people can really talk to us. And also if we have these lighthouse projects, or we know that there are several good examples already, so we have to communicate, we have to emphasize and show them to the public. So because people sometimes they just don't know what is a good sample of being part of planning or being part of this decision making. So we have to just show that, and then there is a lot of opportunities for that.
All right, so thank you so much for your constructive and really concrete ideas. It's very nice to start like this in a forum. Thank you so much. Danke auch an alle, die mitgemacht haben, die ihre Fragen gestellt haben. Wir werden jetzt gleich in eine Pause gehen. In 15 Minuten wird es dann eine Lesung geben von Raffaela Edelbauer. Sie liest aus ihrem Science-Fiction-Roman Dave. Und wir sehen uns dann um 12 Uhr wieder beim nächsten Panel. Bis dann. Thank you so much.